The air was thick with anticipation. A hum of voices rising and falling like waves in the university's grand auditorium. I sat in the back, my hands folded over the worn handle of my cane. The weight of 82 years pressing into my bones, but not my spirit. The folding chair they'd given me was tucked so close to the kitchen doors I could smell the faint tang of industrial cleaner and hear the clatter of trays being stacked. My grandson, Marcus, was out there somewhere, his cap and gown a beacon of everything I'd fought for. But here I was, Margaret Elaine Thompson, relegated to the shadows, my view obstructed by a sea of heads and a poorly placed pillar. I wasn't surprised. Not really. The world has a way of nudging the elderly aside, assuming we're content to fade into the background. They see the wrinkles, the slow steps, and think we're done making noise. But I've never been one to sit quietly. Not when I was raising 3 kids alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. Not when I marched for rights they now take for granted. And certainly not today. Marcus was graduating, the first in our family to hold a college degree, and I'd be damned if I'd watch it from the sidelines. The auditorium buzzed with families adjusting cameras, whispering excitedly about their graduates. I shifted in my seat, my knees protesting, and caught a glimpse of the stage, a distant blur of black robes and bright sashes. The program in my lap listed Marcus's name under summa cum laude, and my chest swelled with a pride so fierce it could have lit the room. I'd helped raise him after his mother, my daughter, passed too young. Late nights with math homework, early mornings driving him to debate practice, and endless talks about dreams bigger than our little corner of the world. It all led to this. But the seat they'd given me, a slap in the face. I'd called the university weeks ago, explaining I was hard of hearing, that I needed to see the stage clearly. The young woman on the phone had been polite, promising a good spot. Yet here I was, practically in the kitchen, the servers brushing past me with trays of lukewarm coffee. I could have let it go. I could have sat there, smiled, and clapped when Marcus's name was called. But something in me, call it stubbornness, call it firewall, wouldn't let it rest. I leaned forward, scanning the room. The front rows were filled with suited men and women in pearls, their posture screaming privilege. I wondered how many had called ahead, how many had slipped a donation to secure their view. My hands tightened around my cane. Marcus deserved to see me there, proud and present, not hidden away like an afterthought. I'd taught him to stand up, to speak out, and I wasn't about to let him down now. The ceremony began with a fanfare of trumpets, the dean striding to the podium with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome," he boomed, "to this celebration of achievement." His words blurred into the usual platitudes: hard work, bright futures, legacy. I tuned him out, my gaze fixed on the stage, searching for Marcus. I pictured him at 6, gap-toothed and curious, asking why the sky was blue. I saw him at 16, defiant and brilliant, winning his first debate. And now, at 22, he was a man, stepping into a world I'd helped build for him. The first names were called, graduates crossing the stage to cheers, cum laude, the announcer said, and the crowd clapped politely. I shifted again, craning my neck, but the pillar blocked half the stage. A server bumped my chair, muttering an apology. That was it. I'd had enough. I pushed myself up, my cane steadying me as I rose. The people around me glanced over, surprised, their whispers fading. I didn't care. I took a step forward, then another, my purple dress catching the light. It was the dress I'd worn to my daughter's funeral, the one I'd chosen because she'd loved the color. Today, it felt like armor. "Excuse me," I said, my voice louder than I'd expected, cutting through the hum of the crowd. Heads turned. I kept walking, slow but deliberate, toward the center aisle. The dean's voice faltered mid-sentence. I could feel the weight of eyes on me, hundreds of them, but I didn't waver. I'd faced worse than curious stares in my time. "Ma'am," A young usher in a cheap suit rushed toward me, his face a mix of concern and annoyance. "You need to return to your seat." "I'm going where I can see my grandson," I said, my tone sharp but calm. "You put me by the kitchen. That's not where I belong." His mouth opened, then closed, like a fish out of water. The crowd murmured, some amused, some confused. I didn't stop. I kept moving, my cane tapping the floor, until I reached the middle of the aisle. There, I turned to face the stage, standing tall as I could manage. The dean was staring now, his speech forgotten. "Dean Whitaker," I called, my voice carrying the weight of every year I'd lived, every fight I'd won. "My name is Margaret Thompson. My grandson is Marcus Thompson, graduating today. I raised him, and I'm here to see him walk that stage. You will not hide me in the back." The auditorium fell silent, the kind of silence that feels like the world holding its breath. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a single clap broke the quiet. Another followed, then more, until the room erupted in applause. I stood there, heart pounding, as the dean's face shifted from shock to something like respect. "Please," he said finally, gesturing to an empty seat in the front row. "Mrs. Thompson, join us here." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and made my way forward. The crowd parted, their cheers carrying me like a tide. I wasn't just Margaret anymore. I was every grandmother, every elder, who'd been pushed aside and refused to stay there. And as I took my seat, I knew Marcus would see Miralisi Muhen. He crossed that stage. The ceremony resumed, but my mind was already racing ahead. This moment wasn't just about me or Marcus. It was about what we leave behind, the fights we choose, and the ones we win. I settled into the chair, my eyes locked on the stage, ready to witness the future I'd helped shape. The front row seat felt like a victory, but it wasn't comfortable. The cushion was too thin, and the armrest dug into my side. Still, I sat straight, my cane propped against my knee, my eyes fixed on the stage. The dean had recovered his composure, his voice steady as he called more names. The crowd's applause ebbed and flowed, a rhythm I barely noticed. My focus was on Marcus, somewhere in that sea of black gowns, waiting for his moment. I thought back to the days when Marcus was small, his hand clutching mine as we walked to the library, his questions endless. "Grandma, why do some people get more than others?" He'd asked once, his brow furrowed at the sight of a man sleeping on a park bench. I'd struggled to explain inequality to a 7-year-old, settling on, "Because the world's not fair yet, but we keep trying to make it better." He'd nodded, serious even then, and I'd seen the spark of something fierce in him, a spark I recognized from myself. Now, as the announcer called magna cum laude, my heart quickened. Marcus was next. I leaned forward, ignoring the ache in my back. The pillar was gone, the stage clear, and I could see every detail: the red velvet curtains, the polished wood of the podium, the dean's hands gripping the edges as he read the names. Then, there he was, Marcus Thompson, striding across the stage, his gown flowing, his smile wide enough to light the room. The crowd clapped, but I didn't. Not yet. I wanted to see his eyes, to know he saw me. As he took his diploma, he turned, scanning the audience. Our gazes locked, and his smile softened, his head dipping in a nod meant just for me. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back. This was his moment, and I wouldn't blur it with crying. He stepped off the stage, and I exhaled, my hands trembling in my lap. The weight of the years hit May's mother's death, the nights I'd lain awake worrying about bills, the mornings I'd driven him to school when my arthritis screamed. All of it led to this, to him standing tall, a degree in his hand and a future wide open. The ceremony dragged on, names blending into one another. But I stayed alert, my mind replaying that moment when Marcus saw me. I wondered what he'd felt pride. Maybe. Or gratitude. I hoped he understood what it meant for me to be here. Front and center. After they'd tried to tuck me away. I wasn't just his grandmother today. I was proof that you could demand your place. No matter your age or how the world tried to dismiss you. When the final graduate crossed the stage, the dean returned to the podium. His voice warmer now. Before we conclude, he said, I want to acknowledge Mrs. Margaret Thompson. My name echoed through the auditorium, and heads turned again. Her courage today reminds us that every voice matters. Every story counts. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson, for being here and for raising such an extraordinary graduate. The applause was louder this time, a wave that lifted me. I didn't stand, didn't acknowledge it beyond a small nod. Let them clap. I wasn't here for their approval. I was here for Marcus, for the promise I'd made to his mother to see him through. But the dean's words stirred something in me, a reminder that my act, small as it seemed, had rippled outward. Maybe it would make them think twice before shoving someone else to the back. As the crowd began to disperse, families spilling into the aisles, I stayed seated, watching Marcus weave through the chaos toward me. He was taller now than when he'd left for college. His shoulders broader, but his eyes were the same bright, curious, a little defiant. He reached me, kneeling so we were eye to eye, and took my hand. You didn't have to do that, Grandma, he said, his voice low, teasing but proud. But I'm glad you did. I squeezed his hand, my grip stronger than he probably expected. Had to make sure you saw me, I said. You're not the only one making a statement today. He laughed, the sound warm and familiar, and helped me to my feet. The auditorium was emptying, but I felt no rush. We'd earned this moment, both of us. As we walked out together, his arms steady under mine, I thought about the years ahead, his career, his dreams, the battles he'd face. I wouldn't always be there to stand up and call out the dean, but I'd given him something today, a lesson in refusing to be invisible. Outside, the sun was high, the campus alive with families posing for photos. Marcus led me to a bench under an oak tree, and we sat, the noise of the crowd fading into the background. Tell me about it, I said, nudging him. What's it feel like, holding that degree? He grinned, pulling the diploma from its folder. Like I'm just getting started, he said. Like I owe you everything. I shook my head. You owe yourself, Marcus. I just made sure you had a chance. We sat there, talking, laughing, the weight of the day settling into something softer. But in the back of my mind, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. Not for Marcus, and not for me. There were still fights to be fought, places to claim. And I'd be ready, cane in hand, voice steady, for whatever came next. The oak tree's shade was a mercy, the late spring sun relentless as it beat down on the campus quad. Marcus and I sat on the bench, his diploma resting between us like a shared trophy. Around us, families laughed and snapped photos, their voices a cheerful chaos. I watched a young girl in a frilly dress chase a balloon, her mother calling after her, and felt a pang for the days when Marcus was that small, when the world seemed simpler but was just as hard. You're quiet, Marcus said, nudging my shoulder. What's going on in that head of yours? I smiled, adjusting my grip on my cane. Just thinking about how far we've come, and how much you've got ahead of you. He leaned back, his eyes tracing the branches above us. I'm thinking about law school, he said, almost shyly. Maybe civil rights. Make a difference. You know. Like you did. My heart swelled, but I kept my face steady. You don't need to follow my path, Marcus. You've got your own. He shook his head, his expression serious. You marched, Grandma. You stood up to people who wanted to keep you down. That's not just your path, it's who we are. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the boy who'd once asked me why the world wasn't fair. He wasn't that boy anymore, but the question still burned in him. I reached for his hand. My fingers gnarled against his smooth ones. "Then make it count," I said. "But don't think it's easy. The world doesn't change because you want it to. It changes because you make it." He nodded, and we sat in silence for a while, the weight of his words settling between us. I thought about my own fight sit-ins in the 60s, the letters I'd written to city officials, the nights I'd gone to bed hungry so my kids could eat. I'd never thought of myself as a hero, just a woman doing what needed doing. But sitting here, with Marcus's future stretching out before him, I felt the echo of those choices, the way they'd shaped him. A group of graduates walked by, their laughter pulling me back to the moment. One of them, a young woman with braids and a bright smile, waved at Marcus. "That's Aisha," he said, waving back. "She's going into public policy. Wants to fix the school system." "Good," I said. "She'll need that fire. You both will." He grinned, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "You think I'm ready for it? The real world?" I chuckled, the sound rough in my throat. "Nobody's ready, Marcus. You just step into it and figure it out. Like I did when I stood up in there." I nodded toward the auditorium, now emptying out, its doors swinging shut. He laughed, shaking his head. "You're something else, Grandma. Calling out the dean like that. I thought they were going to escort you out." "They could have tried," I said, my tone sharper than I meant. But I wasn't moving. "Not today." He looked at me, his eyes softening. "You never move, do you? Not when it matters." I didn't answer, just squeezed his hand again. The truth was, I'd moved plenty, bent, compromised, stepped back when I had to. But not when it came to him. Not when it came to family. I'd learned long ago that some fights were worth standing for, no matter how tired you were. The quad was starting to clear, families heading to cars or restaurants to celebrate. Marcus stood, offering his arm. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you something to eat. You've earned it." I took his arm, my steps slower than his but steady. We walked toward the parking lot, the sun warm on my face, the air filled with the scent of blooming jasmine. I thought about the kitchen doors, the pillar, the usher's flustered face. I thought about the dean's voice saying my name, the crowd's applause. It wasn't about glory, it was about being seen, about claiming a space for Marcus and me, for all of us who'd been pushed to the edges. As we reached the car, Marcus opened the door for me, his movements careful, respectful. I paused before getting in, looking up at him. "You know why I did it, right?" I asked. He nodded, his smile soft but sure. "Because you're Margaret Thompson, and you don't let anyone tell you where you belong." I laughed, the sound lighter than I felt. "That's right. And don't you forget it." We drove off, the campus fading behind us. But the moment stayed with me. It wasn't just about today, about a graduation or a seat in the front row. It was about legacy, about the fire we pass down, the courage we teach. Marcus had that fire now, and I knew he'd carry it further than I ever could. And that, more than anything, was worth standing for. The restaurant Marcus chose was one of those modern places with too many windows and not enough soul. The tables were sleek, the menus printed on heavy cardstock, and the waiters moved with a practiced efficiency that made me miss the diner we used to go to, with its chipped mugs and greasy fries. Still, Marcus was beaming, his diploma propped against the salt shaker like a prize. I let him order for me some kind of salad with ingredients I couldn't pronounce and watched him chat with the waiter. His confidence easy, natural. "You're different," I said when the waiter left, my voice quieter than I meant. "Grown up." He laughed, leaning back in his chair. "I'm still me, Grandma. Just, maybe a little shinier now." I raised an eyebrow. Shiny's good. But don't let it polish away the grit. That's what keeps you going. He nodded, his eyes flicking to the diploma. I won't. Promise. The food arrived, and we ate slowly. The conversation drifting from his plans law school applications. A summer internship to memories of his childhood. He reminded me of the time he'd tried to fix my old radio with a butter knife, nearly electrocuting himself. I laughed until my sides ached. The sound drawing stares from nearby tables. Let them stare. We were celebrating. But beneath the laughter, I felt a quiet ache. Marcus was moving into a world I couldn't follow. Not fully. Law school. Courtrooms. A life of arguments and ideal sit was everything I'd wanted for him. But it meant letting go. I'd raised him to fly. But the thought of him soaring so far left a hollow space in my chest. You're doing it again, he said, catching my eye. That quiet thing. What's up? I set my fork down, choosing my words carefully. Just thinking about your mom. She'd be so proud of you. Marcus. So proud. His smile faded, just for a moment, and I saw the boy who'd cried for her. The one who'd clung to me when the world felt too big. I miss her, he said simply. But I feel like she's here. You know. Because of you. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. She's here, I said. In you. In everything you do. We didn't say much after that. Just ate in a comfortable silence. The kind that comes from knowing someone through and through. When the bill came, Marcus insisted on paying, waving off my protests. You've done enough. Grandma, he said. Let me take care of this. I let him, but not without a playful glare. Don't get used to it, I said. I'm still in charge. He grinned. Yes, ma'am. As we left the restaurant, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Marcus drove us home, the radio playing something soft and jazzy. I leaned back, my cane across my lap, and let the music carry me. My mind wandered to the auditorium again, to the moment I'd stood and called out the dean. It felt like a lifetime ago, but it was only hours. I wondered if Marcus understood what it had cost Minute, just the effort, but the years of fighting that had taught me to stand in the first place. When we pulled up to my house, a small brick bungalow with roses I'd planted decades ago, Marcus helped me out of the car. The air was cool now, the neighborhood quiet except for the hum of crickets. We stood on the porch, his arm around my shoulders, and I felt the weight of the day settle into something solid, something good. You did good today, I said, looking up at him. Not just the degree. The way you carry yourself. You're ready. He hugged me, careful but firm. Because of you, he said. I mean it. I waved him off, embarrassed by the warmth in my chest. Go on. Get some rest. You've got a big life to start. He laughed, heading back to his car. Love you, Grandma. Love you too, I called, watching him drive away, his taillights fading into the dusk. Inside, the house was quiet, the familiar creak of the floorboards greeting me. I set my cane by the door and sank into my armchair, the one that still smelled faintly of my daughter's perfume. The day played over in my mind: the kitchen doors, the aisle, the dean's voice, Marcus's smile. I'd stood up today, not just for myself, but for him, for her, for every elder who'd been pushed aside. And I'd do it again, 1,000 times over, if it meant showing Marcus what it meant to fight. I closed my eyes, the weight of the day lifting just a little. Tomorrow, I'd call him, make sure he was eating properly, remind him to send thank you notes. Tomorrow, I'd keep being Margaret Thompson, the woman who didn't sit quietly. But for now, I let myself rest, the echo of applause still ringing in my ears. Morning came softly, sunlight slipping through the curtains of my living room. I woke in my armchair, my neck stiff from sleeping upright. the events of yesterday clinging to me like a half-remembered dream. My cane leaned against the coffee table, and on it, a photo of Marcus and me from years ago, him in a too-big baseball cap, me smiling wide, both of us squinting into the sun. I touched the frame, my fingers tracing the edges, and felt a quiet resolve settle over me. The phone rang as I was making coffee, the old landline jarring in the stillness. It was Marcus, his voice bright despite the early hour. "Morning, Grandma. You okay after yesterday?" I chuckled, stirring sugar into my cup. "I'm fine, boy. Takes more than a walk down an aisle to wear me out." He laughed, the sound easing the ache in my bones. "Just checking. I'm heading to Aisha's place later, throwing a little party for the graduates. You want to come?" I pictured a room full of 20-somethings. Music too loud. Conversations I'd struggle to hear. "I'll pass," I said. "But you tell Aisha to keep that fire for fixing schools. And don't drink too much." "Yes, ma'am," he said, mock serious. "I'll call you tomorrow." "Okay." "Better," I said, hanging up with a smile. The day stretched ahead, empty but not lonely. I busied myself with small tasks, watering the roses, sorting mail, flipping through Marcus's old debate trophies on the shelf. Each one was a reminder of the years we'd spent together, building something stronger than either of us could have done alone. But yesterday's stand in the auditorium kept circling back, a moment that felt bigger than itself. By afternoon, I was restless. I pulled out a box of old letters from the attic, ones I'd written to my daughter when she was young, ones she'd written back. Her handwriting was messy, full of loops and dreams, and reading them felt like holding her again. I found one from when she was pregnant with Marcus, her words spilling over with hope and fear. "Mama," she'd written, "I want him to have everything we didn't. Promise you'll help me make that happen." I kept that promise, even after she was gone. Yesterday, standing in that auditorium, was part of it, showing Marcus he came from people who didn't back down, who claimed their place no matter what. I tucked the letters away, my chest tight, and decided to walk to the corner store. The fresh air would do me good. The neighborhood was alive with kids playing, dogs barking, the hum of life that never stopped. I moved slowly, my cane tapping the sidewalk, and nodded at neighbors who waved. At the store, Mrs. Carter, who'd known me for decades, leaned over the counter. "Heard about your stunt at the graduation," she said, her eyes twinkling. Calling out the dean. "Margaret, you're a legend." I laughed, picking up a loaf of bread. "Just making sure they saw me." "They saw you. All right," she said. "Whole town's talking about it." I shrugged, but her words stayed with me as I walked home. I hadn't done it for the talk, but it felt good to know the story was spreading. Maybe it would reach someone else, another elder tucked away in the back, and give them the courage to stand. That evening, I sat on my porch, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand. The sunset was slow, painting the sky in purples and golds that reminded me of my dress yesterday. I thought about Marcus, about the party he was at, the life he was building. I thought about the dean, the usher, the crowd, how they'd looked at me, first with shock, then with something like awe. I'd spent my life fighting to be seen, not just for myself, but for my daughter, for Marcus, for everyone who came after. A car pulled up, and I squinted, recognizing Aisha's bright red hatchback. Marcus stepped out, followed by Aisha, her braids swinging as she waved. "Thought we'd drop by," Marcus called, holding up a takeout bag. "Got your favorite fried chicken." I grinned, setting my tea down. "You trying to bribe me, boy?" "Maybe," he said, climbing the porch steps. Aisha followed, her smile warm as she hugged me. "Heard you stole the show yesterday, Mrs. Thompson," she said. "Wish I'd seen it." You'll see plenty if you stick with this one, I said, nodding at Marcus. We sat together, eating and talking, the night wrapping around us like a blanket. Aisha told me about her plans for education reform, her voice fierce with passion. Marcus listened, his pride in her as clear as mine in him. As they left, Marcus hugged me again, his arms strong. Thanks for everything, Grandma, he said. Not just yesterday. All of it. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. As their car disappeared, I stayed on the porch, the stars coming out one by one. Yesterday wasn't just a moment, it was a spark, a reminder that we're never too old to stand, to speak, to shape the world for those we love. The days after the graduation blurred into a quiet rhythm. I woke early, made coffee, tended my roses. Marcus called often, his voice a steady thread connecting me to his new life. He was applying to law schools, spending evenings with Aisha, planning a future I could see as clearly as if it were my own. But the memory of the auditorium lingered, a bright spot in my mind, like a photograph I could pull out and hold. One morning, a letter arrived from the university, the envelope thick and official. I opened it, expecting a form letter, maybe a thank you for attending. Instead, it was from Dean Whitaker himself. Dear Mrs. Thompson, it began. Your presence at our commencement ceremony was a powerful reminder of the strength and resilience of our community. We are establishing a scholarship in your name, the Margaret Thompson Courage Award, to honor students who embody your spirit of advocacy and determination. I read it twice, my hand shaking. A scholarship. My name. I set the letter down, staring out the window at the roses, their petals bright against the green. I'd never thought of myself as someone to name things after. I was just Margaret, who'd done what needed doing. But this felt like a piece of me would live on, long after I was gone. I called Marcus, reading him the letter. He hooped, his laughter filling the line. Grandma, that's incredible. You're going to be famous. Famous, I scoffed, but I was smiling. Just don't let it go to your head. That afternoon, I walked to the community center, where I sometimes volunteered, helping kids with their reading. The director, Ms. Elena, greeted me with a grin. Heard about your scholarship, she said. You're putting us all to shame, Margaret. I waved her off, but the kids were already buzzing, asking questions. Did you really yell at the dean? One boy asked, his eyes wide. Didn't yell, I said. Just spoke loud enough to be heard. They laughed, and I spent the hour reading with them, their voices stumbling over words, their faces lighting up when they got it right. It felt like the auditorium all over again, small acts, big ripples. I thought about the scholarship, about the students it would help, and felt a warmth I hadn't known I needed. Weeks later, Marcus and Aisha came by with news. He'd been accepted to law school, a top program with a focus on civil rights. We celebrated on the porch, the same takeout chicken as before, the air filled with their plans and dreams. Aisha talked about her work, about policies that could change lives. Marcus listened, his hand resting on hers, and I saw my daughter in him, the same fire, the same heart. As they talked, I thought about the kitchen doors, the aisle, the moment I'd stood. It wasn't just about me or Marcus. It was about every person who'd been pushed to the edges, told to sit quietly, to wait their turn. I'd stood for them, too, and the scholarship was proof that one voice, one moment, could echo far beyond itself. When they left, I stayed on the porch, the night cool and quiet. I thought about my daughter, about the promise I'd kept. I thought about Marcus, carrying that promise forward. And I thought about the scholarship, a legacy I hadn't planned but was proud to claim. I was 82, my body slower than it used to be, but my spirit, that was still standing, still calling out. still fighting for a world where no one gets seated by the kitchen. I leaned back, my cane across my lap, and looked at the stars. They were bright, endless, a reminder that some things last. Like love, like courage, like the name Margaret Thompson, carved into a scholarship, into a story, into the heart of a grandson who'd make the world better because he knew he could. And that, I thought, was enough.